Are you a podcaster who has recently started their podcast and or have been podcasting for quite some time, and you get around other people who's been podcasting for longer than you, and you start to compare yourself? You start to say, man, I don't have their type of equipment, I don't have their type of confidence, I don't have their type of podcast. In this video today, we're going to talk about why not to compare your podcast journey and why your podcast journey is very unique to you. What's going on, everybody? My name is Terrell Humphrey, and welcome to another episode of the Failure Knowledge Podcast. Over the last half a decade, we've produced over 893 podcast episodes while helping many entrepreneurs launch their podcast in a short span of time. The biggest thing that I started to recognize, even with myself, is that I would get around people or somebody who has a podcast or who's been podcasting for 10, 20, 30 years, and I start to doubt my ability. I start to doubt my podcast. When I started to recognize over time, it was that I wasn't doubting my podcast. I was comparing my podcast. Man, they have this fancy location. Man, they got this fancy equipment. Man, they sound so good. I'm comparing myself, not knowing that the journey that I'm on is my own journey, and every podcast has its own journey. So when I started to really understand more about podcasting, it became like clear that I need to stop comparing myself. Comparison is the thief of joy because I'm always looking for the next thing. I'll tell you this, it took me a while to recognize that I'm on my own path. Like, I'm not trying to be like the next podcast. I'm not trying to be like the next business owner. I'm trying to be better than yesterday. Yesterday is who I'm trying to be better than. And when I started to recognize that I'm in competition with myself, rather than comparing myself, it started to make sense. And what it started to make sense was this. Podcasting takes time to develop. After producing 893 podcast episodes, that is a lot of practice. That is a lot of effort. That is a lot of skills. That's a lot of development. And when I started to recognize that I was comparing myself to other people who has been podcasting for longer than me, maybe they got 1,000 episodes, maybe they got 2,000 episodes, maybe they got 3,000 episodes, but it's the journey. The journey is meant to teach you a lesson, but first I had to understand what that lesson was. So the first one that we're going to talk about is that not to compare yourself. The reason why you shouldn't compare yourself is because everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's trying to figure it out, and everybody who has a podcast has begun at some point. It's when you start to understand that you have a starting point. My starting point was with a small tripod. I had 3 books underneath it, and the camera didn't even fit me in the camera. But I tilted the camera down and I started to record. I started to learn. I started to get comfortable. What did that do for me? That helped me understand that 1, this is my podcast journey. 2, I have to take ownership of my podcast journey. 3, I just have to practice more. The more reps someone gets, the better they become. You can't get better if you're not doing better. If you're not doing better, you cannot podcast correctly. I've had many conversations with many entrepreneurs, many thought leaders, many executives, many people who are doing business. And when I learned that podcasting was a way to share your story, to market your business, to communicate effectively, every podcast has a different mission. Okay. What does that even mean? Just like every business has a different mission. Failure's Knowledge mission is helping leaders turn setbacks into success by helping them launch their podcast. The reason why that's so important is because when I recognize that I have to stop comparing myself, I have to learn where I'm at today. Sometimes half a decade ago when I was starting, I didn't have the information that I had today. I didn't have the confidence that I had today. I didn't have the direction that I had today. I didn't have the proof of concept that I had today. I didn't have the testimonials that I had today. It's not just the fact that that I'm on a journey. I'm just discovering. What am I discovering? What am I doing? How can I help? How can I encourage others? How can I inspire others? It's not the fact that it's not working. It's more so that I had to get it to work for myself. When I started to do that, the comparison left my mind. Because now when I go to different podcasters and they have different studios, different locations, different equipment, I'm looking, I'm observing, and I'm watching. Why? Because one day I will be there. Today I might not be there, but one day I will be there. And so when I started to instead of compare myself, I got inspired. I'm like, man, like I asked a couple questions like, okay, so how much was this camera? Because the camera body, when you get into podcasts and start having all your equipment and stuff like that, the camera body is different than the lens. Like the lens itself costs a good amount of money, just as much as the camera body. Why are they been so differently? Why do they have two different price tags? Well, that's something that you learn along your journey. Just because you have a phone doesn't mean that you can't upgrade your equipment. What it does mean is that you have to start with what you have so your equipment can be upgraded. See, a lot of business owners who launch their podcast got it in reverse order. They go get the equipment first and then learn a podcast. And then start to put themselves out there and then start to publish the episodes. But in reality, they just have the equipment because they are not using it. They are not using it. They have the equipment and the equipment is collecting dust. So then you start to question like, why did y'all go and get the equipment if you don't know how to use the equipment? Or if you don't know how to use the podcast, or if you don't know how to share your expertise, or if you're not bringing people onto your platform so they can share their expertise. It's not just about having a podcast in a way that's going to help others. It's literally about positioning yourself differently that you can help others grow, succeed, and accomplish everything that they would like to do. Podcasting is a way to not to compare yourself, but to be inspired. When I go to these different podcast studios, I'm looking at how they work in the studio. I'm looking to see how what equipment they have. I'm looking to see how they interact with me. I'm observing, I'm learning. When you have your podcast, it's your podcast, it's your journey. Just like if you have a business, it's your business, it's your journey. Everybody's business is different. Everybody's podcast is different. Everyone's journey is different. If you're just like the next podcaster, mind you, there's over 4.5 million podcasters out there. That's a lot of podcasts to be alike. Nonetheless, there's opportunity. There's growth. There's development. There's discovery. What are you discovering? Yourself. What are you discovering? Who you are. What are you discovering? The problem that you solve. What are you discovering? The business behind your podcast. What are you discovering? How to grow an audience. What are you discovering? Information that won't be relevant until you discover what information you are looking for. It's hard. It's going to be hard. Podcasting is not easy because you have to find a way to be consistent. I'm going to say that one again because that hit home. Podcasting is difficult because you have to find a way to be consistent. It's challenging, it's difficult, and it's overwhelming. But that doesn't mean that you cannot accomplish the goal of having a successful podcast. See, when you start to share your story, you help others share their stories more effectively. As they share their story more effectively, guess who gets the credit? The person who helped them feel more confident to share their story. Guess who gets the recognition? The person who created the platform for the person to come and share the story. I've done countless amount of interviews, and I've always been curious by nature. Like, if you know me, I've always been curious. Like I remember one time my wife and I went to the library, and I had got done printing out some papers, and I went outside and I saw a man with his kids, and I just asked him a question. I'm like, bro, you mind if I ask a random question? He said, yeah. I said, man, how does it feel to be a dad? He looked at me and he answered the question. And the reason why I asked that question, because right now, my wife and I don't have any kids, but the goal is to have kids. But I'm curious. I'm asking questions. I want to get better. The only way I can get better is if I find a way to become better. I can't get better if I'm not podcasting. I can't get better if I'm not learning about business. I can't get better if I'm not putting myself out there. I can't get better if I don't understand what I'm doing. Where in fact, I start to understand like, wait, there's something here. I shouldn't compare myself, but what I should do is learn from others. One day, One day I will be able to have the podcast studio. One day I'll be able to tour and have a podcast tour. One day I will be able to have a podcast event. One day, but that one day is not today. And just because it's not today doesn't mean that it won't happen. What it means is that I have to get inspiration from other people. When you have a podcast, let's just say you've been podcasting for 3 to 5 months. And you've been podcasting and nothing is happening, nothing is coming from that. And when you podcast longer, so let's say from 3 to 6 months, now you've been podcasting for a year. Okay, now you're gaining the confidence, you're gaining the know-how, you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you go about doing it. Then you've been podcasting for 2 years. Then like something's starting to click, but not everything, but something. Okay, then then you proceed to 3 years. You start to understand the business of the podcast. Now you got to start the learning over. Then when you start the learning over, year 4, you're implementing what you learned in year 3. And then when year 4 comes, you got year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 of experience. Then when year 5 come, you have more experience than you had when you first started your podcast 3 to 6 months, half a decade ago. What did I just share with you? I shared my journey. You see, it was hard for me to understand that there's something happening here. What was the something? I'm like, I don't see nothing. I'm thinking that you can get paid on social media platforms. You can. I haven't, but you can. So I don't talk about getting paid from social media platforms because I haven't got paid from it. I don't know how to get paid consistently from the social media platforms. On the contrary, I do know how to be consistent. When people are communicating with me and they're sharing, like, I recently saw your podcast, I recently listened to what you were saying, I recently saw you at this event. Oh, they're listening. Oh, they're watching. Oh, they're responding. You see, it takes time. And just because it takes time doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. In fact, you just haven't given it enough time. That's the next point I want to hit on. So the first point that we talked about was that you have to stop comparing your podcast. Everybody has their own journey. Don't compare your journey to the next person. Next point that we're going to talk about is to understand what you have to learn. When you understand what you have to learn, you're not just learning about podcasting. Let's switch the language from the podcast language to the business language. What's actually happening? You are marketing yourself effectively through podcasting. You're sharing your stories. You're sharing your expertise. You're building that trust. When people learn more about you and they trust you, they do more business with you. But before the business ever come, I had to understand what business I was in. The business is what makes a difference. To launch your podcast, you have to learn the basics. Once you learn the basics, you implement. You do. You can't do if you don't understand the business. You can't do if you don't learn what you're supposed to be doing. Over half a decade, I've learned a lot. Over half a decade, I've applied a lot. Over half a decade, I've understood a lot. Here's the thing. I went out to go search the information. The information didn't come to me. I went to go get the information. I went to college. I started going to networking events. I started going to events. I started going to conferences. I remember when I got out the Marine Corps, I think I still was in the Marine Corps. I had went to this event and it was in Orlando, Florida. And when I went to this event, I'm seeing like what it's like to have a conference and have all of these people come to your event. It was a lot of people at this event. I think he said it was 1,000 people at that event. And when the people came, it was about to learn about real estate investing. So I'm there, I'm in the crowd, but I'm watching the crowd. I'm watching the people on stage. I'm listening, I'm taking notes, I'm learning. Then they ask the question, or they open the floor for questions. And I go ask multiple different questions. And when I ask multiple different questions, I got a different perspective. So when I asked the different questions, guess what I was doing? I was learning on the spot. I was learning on the spot because I'm not just going to sit here and not ask the question if y'all going to open the floor for questions. In fact, what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm one of the first ones to ask the question. The first person who asks the question is the one who's more focused. You see, I got a tactic, a strategy. Whenever I go to the event, I'm going to ask a question. Whenever I go outside this house, I'm going to ask a question. Whenever I leave, guess what? I'm going to ask a question. I'm looking to learn. And the only way that I can learn is if I'm asking questions. You have to understand what you are wanting to learn and position it and ask the questions so you can get the answers. I don't know everything. I don't pretend like I know everything. But I'm pretty sure somebody who has more experience in business understand more about more business than I do. So let me go ask them a question. Let me go communicate with them. Let me go ask them and understand where they're at, and how did you get here? I specifically ask majority of the times, how did you know that this is what you needed to do? I'm not asking for like the strategies. I'm asking for your experience. How did you know this is something that you wanted to do? Because for me, it took a long time. Because it wasn't working for me. But I didn't give up. I still was figuring it out. But I want to know from your perspective. And they share their experience. And now their experience become education because they just taught me something. They taught me their thought process. They taught me their philosophy. They taught me why they got to where they are today. It wasn't a coincidence that they are at where they are at today. It was intentional. They took action. They did the work. They showed up. When you understand what you need to learn will become clear as day. You might not have the definition of what you're doing. You might not understand what you're doing, but I guarantee the people who's been doing business longer than you, or who's been doing podcasting longer than you, or who's been putting themselves out there longer than you, there's a difference that's there. And what's there is opportunity. See, I see everything as opportunity instead of a comparison. How can I learn something new? How can I observe something new? I did a podcast workshop this past Wednesday. Excuse me. And when I did the podcast workshop, it was phenomenal because I switched it. I'm like, all right, cool. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to teach this first. Then once I teach it, we are going to apply like launching your podcast right on the spot. I did that. The attendees that was attending the podcast workshop shared their story for 2 to 3 minutes, got on camera, implemented what we just talked about, and I saw a shift. It's no longer what equipment do I need, or how can I launch my podcast, or like I need all this equipment, I need all the cameras, all the lights, all the microphones, all the locations, all the studios. I need all of this to them sitting down and experiencing launching their podcast. I saw the shifts happen because I understood what they needed to learn. But guess where I got the idea from? A previous workshop that I did, and one of the attendees recommended that I applied the podcast in person. And I'm like, yeah, man, like this is a good idea right now, but like right now, I think, well, in my mind, you do have to pay for that because that's the service that I offer. Like I can't just necessarily always just give it out free. But then I thought about it. Then I like really thought about it. I'm like, wait, hold on. People want to launch their podcast. People come here to learn how to launch your podcast. It will be a disservice of me to help you not launch your podcast. Because now, yes, you can go to any workshop to learn. But what if you come to a workshop where you actually apply it and you receive the file, and now you see yourself on camera, and now you hear yourself, and now you experience what it's like to launch your podcast? You see, it was 6 people in the last podcast workshop that I did. All 6 people don't need to become customers. However, I can establish a relationship with the 6 people who were there. You see, hold on. It's different. It's different because of this. Growth happens when you learn when you understand what you need to learn. And when I start to understand what I was learning, all my offers became clear, the way I was communicating became clear, all my content became clear, all my podcasts became clear, all my marketing became clear, all the sales became clear, because I'm selling one thing. I'm selling a thing around launching your podcast, and I can say that in different ways. And in different ways, I can have the same service. So it's not just about launching your podcast, right? It's about positioning yourself as the authority where people can learn more about what you have to offer. That is the second point, is that you have to understand what you're learning. It's not just about podcasting. It's not just about creating content. It's about literally positioning yourself where people can literally launch their podcast with you. And when they launch their podcast with you, or when you launch your own podcast, you're learning what you need to do. And then last point first 2 points that we just talked about. Point number 1 is that you have to stop comparing your podcast to other podcasters. Point number 2, you have to understand what you are learning. Point number 3 is that you have to go refine the information. What does that mean? When you receive the knowledge, when you see information that you didn't have before you asked the questions or before you went to go search the information, you have to apply what you already received. I remember when I got into a business and I started doing and understanding business, that was like, you have to go out and speak to your customers. I'm like, all right, cool. I don't have no problem with that. Like, I tend to talk to anybody. So I go out and I talk to people. And what I learned is that when you get the information from people, you have to come back, revisit it, and understand what was communicated. I will stop at one part. The one part that I will stop at was communicating with them. But now, well, how do you know what people are saying and why they are saying it? And I'm like, oh no. How do you figure that out? This is how. You position yourself as a student of the game. I'm a podcaster, so I'm a student of podcasting. And when I go out and do a podcast episode, I'm getting real life feedback. What works, what doesn't work, what can be better, what can be improved, why did it work, what sounded good. I remember one time I did a podcast with one of my buddies. His name is Bo with Mango Space. I did a podcast with him, right? And for 60 minutes, we had the entire conversation. It was a really great conversation. I get home, take out the SD card. The SD card is like a saving memory card. And I put it in my computer. When I put it in my computer, I open up the file, click the video, played the video. And for some reason, it just told me to keep playing it, keep playing it, keep playing it, keep playing it. I kept playing it. 3 minutes and 17 seconds, the audio went out. The microphone died. And I'm like, how did that happen? I typically have multiple recording devices, but this time I only had one. And this time, this is when the audio stopped at 3 minutes, 17 seconds. I went back, revisited, reached out to him like, hey, I even sent him a video. I said, unfortunately, the audio went out in 3 minutes and 17 seconds. I sent the recording, not the full 3 minutes, but like 10 seconds of him talking, then the audio just going out. So I was like, man, we got to do the podcast again, man. So are you okay with that? Luckily, he said yes. Did the interview the second time. Guess what I had this time? I made sure I had 2 microphones. One for the recording software and the other one for the phone. I made sure that I had multiple recording devices. Why is that important? When you are launching your podcast, when you're doing your podcast, you have to go back and revisit what worked, what didn't work. What did not work when I did the interview is that 1, I had 1 microphone. 2, the microphone was not charged. 3, I didn't have a second recording device. So now I have to guess on how to be better. So when I had to interview again, I had 2 recording devices. I made sure the microphone was charged and that the other microphone was charged. Because it's not just about having a podcast. It's about seeing what works, what doesn't work, and what can be better. When you refine, repeat, and keep going, you are doing podcasting. Why? Because it's something that you have to do every single day. With editing, the same exact thing. With publishing, the same exact thing. You can't learn podcasting if you're not podcasting. If I was to go out and work out, if I was to start learning about how to get back in shape and how to work out, I can read all the books in the world about health, about workouts, about different muscle demonstrations and definitions. I mean, but if I don't go out and do one push-up, I'm not applying the information. If I don't go out and run 1 mile, I'm not applying the information. If I don't go out and do one squat, I'm not applying the information. That's the same thing with podcasts. If you don't go out to podcast, you can't learn how to podcast. If you're not podcasting consistently, you can't become a podcaster. If you're not podcasting in a way where you can grow your business more effectively, then you're not podcasting. It's one thing to learn. It's another to do what you just learned. And so that's kind of like what we are pivoting towards. We can't do it necessarily online as much, which is fine. But I feel like in person, I can do a lot more often. Because when you see yourself, you get a different feeling behind it. And this feeling demonstrates that, wait, I'm taking that first step. I'm taking that leap of faith. I'm taking that chance. Because when you launch your podcast, you're doing more than just press and record. You are connecting with others, and others are learning more about you. So, just to recap everything that we talked about today, is don't compare yourself. Point number one, don't compare your podcast to another podcast. There are many out there, but there are only one podcast, one business owner, one you. Next point that we talked about is that you have to understand what you are learning or what you need to learn. When you understand what you are learning, you will be in a better position to actually learn it. Why? Because you have prepared for it. And point number three is to what I said. I think I said to do the podcast. Like if you're going to learn about podcasting, it's another thing to learn and then to do about it. I think I said that one for point number three. So if you are a business owner, multifamily investor, or someone who just want to share their story and you thought about launching your podcast over the last 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, etc., and you want to launch your podcast, there will be a calendar link, a free 15-minute strategy call in the description below to where you can actually schedule a call. We can learn what challenges you're facing, what you have tried, and connect with you in a way that will help you launch your podcast. Lastly, hit that follow button and subscribe. And don't be afraid to fail, because failure is knowledge.